I'm Katie Wilson and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. The United States vetoes the UN Security Council resolution demanding an immediate Gaza ceasefire. Donald Trump and Sir Keir Starmer unveil technology prosperity deal, renewing the special relationship. And Azerbaijan marks the second anniversary of local anti-terror measures in Karabakh, which fully restored the country's territorial integrity. First this evening, the UN Security Council has failed to adopt a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. The United States vetoed the measure, leaving the release of hostages and the flow of humanitarian aid in limbo.
The United States has for a sixth time used its veto to block the United Nations Security Council efforts to halt the war in Gaza on Thursday. The draft resolution was demanding an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire, the release of hostages and unrestricted humanitarian aid deliveries. 14 of the Council's 15 members voted in favour of it. The US said the draft was unbalanced, arguing it failed to condemn Hamas and ignored Israel's right to defend itself. But aid officials warn famine is already confirmed in Gaza City and surrounding areas, with civilians being killed while searching for food. The Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, says it's heartbreaking that the draft has been blocked.
This draft resolution represents the bare minimum that humanity, legality and morality dictate. It is deeply regrettable and painful that it has been blocked, preventing the Security Council from playing its rightful role in the face of these atrocities and to protect civilians in the face of genocide.
However, Israel praised the US for vetoing what it called a biased resolution. Ambassador Danny Danon said humanitarian aid continues to flow into Gaza, with hundreds of trucks and medical evacuations of people taking place. He also criticised the draft for failing to label Hamas as a terrorist organisation. The Council will reconvene on Gaza next week as world leaders gather in New York for the UN General Assembly.
Of its military operation.
With UN affairs, world leaders are gathering next week in New York for the 80th UN General Assembly. The city is deploying thousands of police officers, drones and counter-terrorism units to secure next week's General Assembly, though they stressed there are no credible threats. New York's Mayor Eric Adams said security would cover streets, subways, airspace and waterways as leaders from around the world gather for the annual debate. The General Assembly speeches begin on Tuesday, with the 193-member world body hosting nearly 150 heads of state or government, along with dozens more ministers. Key topics are the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, Palestinian statehood and Iran's nuclear program.
Those against?
President Trump's state visit to the UK has ended with record US investments worth more than $200 billion. Sir Keir Starmer said the agreements would renew the special relationship and deliver jobs and growth at home.
The centrepiece of Donald Trump's second state visit to the UK was the announcement of $203 billion of American investment. The money will flow into technology, finance and energy, marking the largest US corporate commitment to Britain in modern history.
Years ago, but somehow.
The biggest single pledge came from Blackstone, promising $135 billion over the next decade. Microsoft added $30 billion, while other tech giants, including Nvidia and OpenAI, signed on to a wider $42 billion technology pact. Officials say the combined package could total $340 billion, creating thousands of jobs and helping Britain build data centres, supercomputers and AI infrastructure.
So we're taking the next logical step with a historic agreement on science and technology partnerships, and this will create new government, academic and private sector cooperation in areas such as AI, which is taking over the world.
Look at what we're achieving today together. The deals and investment that you're announcing
today break all records. What a day. £250 billion flowing both ways across the Atlantic. It is the biggest investment package of its kind in British history by a country mile, on which the future...
For Trump, the deals support his goal of keeping the US ahead in the global race for artificial intelligence, with Britain cast as a trusted partner. For Starmer, they show that aligning with Washington can draw in capital, boost growth, and modernise the economy at a time of domestic political strain. But there are risks. Critics warn that relying on US infrastructure could make the UK an outpost of Silicon Valley, limiting its independence and complicating trade with the European Union, its biggest market. Some legal experts say the arrangement reduces Britain's leverage if future disagreements with Washington arise.
Earlier, my colleague spoke with political broadcaster Andy Preston about the UK's decision to recognise Palestinian statehood and what message it sends to allies like the US and Israel. He said both sides can move past it diplomatically, noting that while official stances in Washington may differ, public opinion in the US is shifting closer to the UK and Europe, which have grown increasingly critical of Israel's actions. Let's see more.
I think both sides can definitely move past it, and I think that the UK's change in stance, and we're quite late. We're lagging the stance of other European nations and others across the world, of course, who have moved from a position of staunch support for Israel into a position that is critical of Israel's current actions. And I actually know that behind the scenes, or actually perhaps under the radar, the US population is moving to a very similar position. So while the stance of Donald Trump and the government may officially be one way, the US population is moving in line with the UK population, which has, again, fallen in line with mainstream European population, which has gone from staunch, outright, unwavering support of Israel for condemnation of the current acts.
Looking now to the US, protests have broken out across the country after ABC suspended Jimmy Kimmel's late night show. Demonstrations in California and New York have sparked a wider debate over press freedom and government influence on the media. Meanwhile, President Trump dismissed Kimmel, saying he had no talent.
Nationwide protests have erupted across the United States following ABC's suspension of Jimmy Kimmel's late night show. In California, hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside Disney and ABC studios. Similar rallies took place in New York, where protesters assembled outside ABC's Soho headquarters, arguing that Kimmel's remarks were legitimate criticism, not hate speech. President Donald Trump criticised Kimmel, saying he had no talent, fueling further discussion and division over the controversy.
Some guy had no talent. Kimmel he was fired, he had no talent. He's a whack job, but he had no talent, and more importantly than talent, he had no, because a lot of people have no talent, they get ratings, but he had no ratings. When you have a network and you have evening shows and all they do is hit Trump, that's all they do.
Kimmel was suspended over his comments during his opening monologue on Monday that allies of Charlie Kirk were using his assassination to score political points. He's not yet released a statement, leaving fans and critics speculating about his next move. ABC and Disney have not commented further on the suspension, citing internal review processes.
But if there is, I think...
Moving to the war in Ukraine, Russia launched a drone attack on Kyiv early Friday morning, according to Ukrainian officials. 2 air raid alerts were issued shortly after midnight. Fragments from a downed drone damaged the city's trolleybus lines, according to the head of Kyiv's military administration. Debris fell in several locations, including a central road in the Shevchenkivsky district. However, authorities reported no injuries. European Union finance and economy ministers gathered in Copenhagen on Friday for an informal meeting with a wide range of issues on the agenda. Germany's finance minister Lars Klingbeil said Berlin aimed to work constructively on proposals for the use of frozen Russian assets within the EU. While outright seizure of these assets remains a red line for some members, ministers are exploring ways to deploy them more effectively to bolster support for Ukraine amid uncertainty over US backing under President Trump. Germany has previously voiced legal reservations over full confiscation. Talks will continue into Saturday as ministers and delegates meet for a second day. Turning our attention to France, President Macron and his wife Brigitte are planning to present photographic and scientific evidence to a US court to prove Mrs. Macron is a woman, according to their lawyer. The evidence will come in a defamation suit the Macrons filed against far-right influencer Candace Owens. Owens has baselessly claimed that Brigitte Macron was born a man and is therefore transgender. The influencer has sought to have the suit dismissed. In a recent filing, she and her lawyers said the move is a politically motivated attempt to suppress free speech and punish an American journalist for commentary protected under the First Amendment. No court date has been set yet. Well, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix is off to a chaotic but exciting start. McLaren showed strong early pace in FP1, but it wasn't a smooth session for everyone. Our correspondent Nachicek Jahangali reports from the track.
As promised, we are continuing our coverage of the first day of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix here in Baku. Right now, cars are on the track for free practice too, as drivers push harder and teams gather more data for the weekend ahead. This 1-hour session helps drivers get used to the track and test their tires. It's also a key time for teams as engineers collect important data to prepare for qualifying and the race. Earlier today, free practice 1 started with drama. Just 13 minutes in, a loose curb at turn 16 caused a red flag, and the long delay, it was not the start drivers were hoping for, as it disrupted their rhythm and cost everyone valuable track time. When the session resumed, Lando Norris topped the timesheets for McLaren with the fastest lap. Right behind him was teammate Oscar Piastri, who had some early issues with his power unit and even hit the wall later on, but still managed to finish second. Charles Leclerc looked strong as well, ending the session in third. He has a great record in Baku, having taken pole position here 4 times in a row, and he seems quick again. There was a bit of a surprise as Yuki Tsunoda finished ahead of Max Verstappen. It's only free practice 1, so we can expect Verstappen to find more pace as the weekend goes on. George Russell took 4th, while others didn't get as many laps in due to the red flag delay. So far, McLaren look like the team to beat, but as we've seen before, Baku can be unpredictable with tight walls and long straights. One small mistake can change everything. The weather today has been sunny and warm, with track temperature around 25 degrees Celsius, but things might change with cooler weather expected tomorrow and even a chance of rain. Race even more exciting and challenging. That's all from us for now. We'll be back tomorrow with full coverage of qualifying here at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix.
Welcome back to A News. Returning to the latest developments in the war between Russia and Ukraine, joining us now is Ivani Vasole, Professor at the State University of New York. Thank you for being with us. Now, footage released by Ukraine's Special Operations Forces shows an attack it carried out on a Russian army logistics hub in the Kursk region yesterday. What do we know so far about the fallout from this?
Well, we know that it was a significant attack, perhaps one of the largest since the beginning of the year, one of the largest Ukraine attacks on Russian installations. This is what we know, but also we know that the Russian attacks on Ukraine, they continue, and they are as intense as much as possible as this what we know. So the complexities of the war between Ukraine and Russia going on since February 22 are many. As we know, both countries, Russia and Ukraine, they have differences that they are totally incompatible. The interests of Russia in this war are totally different of the interests of Ukraine. And this has been a conflict very difficult to deal with by all parts involved. Difficult for the United States, particularly the Trump administration, that at the beginning thought that the conflict would be solved in a very short time, but also difficult for the European Union.
Let's stick with Washington for a second. So Trump has made comments about this yesterday. He accused Vladimir Putin of letting him down. That was in a joint press conference with Sir Keir Starmer. What does this tell us about Washington's current position in the conflict?
Yes, it's true. In his visit to Great Britain, President Trump showed disappointment with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, this is not the first time that Trump shows some type of discontent, irritation with the attitudes of Russia. At the same time, Washington tries to seek to improve the relationships between the United States and Russia. At this point, what we know is that President Trump, while in Great Britain, informed that the conflict is much more difficult than he thought at the beginning in terms of a resolution. And he mentioned that while not giving, he is providing weapons to Ukraine through the European Union. In other words, European Union is buying weapons and delivering them to the Ukrainian government.
Should we be concerned about those comments from Trump yesterday? Is that an indication that he's no longer willing to engage in a peace process between Putin and Zelensky?
He is engaging, let's put in a different way. He is quite interested, very much interested in seeing the end of the conflict. This is what he wants, yet he is leading the situation in a way as if giving to the European Union, or at least some European countries, the main task of seeking some type of agreement, a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. This is the point that we can see at this moment, that the interest in the war, yes, is still there. The Trump administration wants to see the end of the conflict, but with less direct involvement.
Starmer must be delighted by these comments, right? Surely he wanted to use Trump's state visit as an opportunity to isolate Putin on the global stage.
From the perspective of Great Britain, yes, and from the perspective of other European countries. The case in the United States is different. There is also an interest of the Trump administration to establish better relations with Russia. And this was seen not long ago in that meeting between the two presidents in Alaska. And this was in August. The idea there was to establish some type of dialogue between the United States and Russia in hopes that through a better dialogue, the war could end.
Now, if we take a look at the war across the past week, Ukraine has worsened fuel shortages across Russia this past week. Is it fair to say that this strategy is working for the Ukrainians?
It's very, very difficult to say. As everybody mentioned, this is a very complex conflict, and the losses, the human losses, are immense on both sides, but particularly in Ukraine. What we can say for sure that Ukraine is resisting. And Ukraine, based on statements, on the interviews by President Zelensky, is not willing to giving up. In other words, Ukraine will continue its fight for sovereignty, for its territories, at the same time that Ukraine is also looking for a way to end the war. The destruction has been significant in the country, and Russia is still inside the Ukraine territory. There are prisoners of war. There are Ukrainian children that has been kidnapped and is now in Russia, and Ukraine is trying to get back, to return to Ukraine those children. So, yes, Ukraine will continue its fight.
And Zelensky has described the fires at Russia's oil refinery, its terminals, oil depots, as the most effective sanctions. What do you make of these comments?
I think it's okay, considering that the oil installations in Russia are very important for the economy of Russia. In other words, the economic survival of Russia is highly dependent on oil and other fossil fuels. Correct. So attacks on the installations can cause damage to the Russian economy.
Do we have a sense of how Russia's cash flow from oil and fuel exports have been affected by these strikes?
The situation, economic situation in Russia is not at the best moment. This is what we can say. So there are obviously economic problems, and as the war goes on, the expectation is that the economic situation could be even worse. And as we know, the European Union in the last few days is discussing a new round of sanctions on Russia, and the sanctions include several punishments, among them a ban on European Union imports of liquefying natural gas, the so-called LNG, that is an important item in the export portfolio of Russia.
Now, I want to mention some fresh news out of Estonia now, where the government has said that 3 Russian fighter jets have violated its airspace for 12 minutes. What is your immediate first take on another violation of airspace in the east of Europe?
It certainly is worrying for European countries. So obviously we have the case of Poland that a few days ago had that launch of Russian drones on its own territory. Certainly it's a concern, and The question is what the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, how it's going to react as we started to see these Russian incursions in NATO countries.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your insight and for joining us on the programme.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Today, Azerbaijan marks the second anniversary of local anti-terror measures in the Karabakh region. On the 19th of September in 2023, an operation was launched to restore the country's constitutional order. Lasting less than 24 hours, it enabled Azerbaijan to fully restore its sovereignty. This victory by the Azerbaijani army also holds great significance for ensuring lasting peace.
It has been 2 years since the Azerbaijani army carried out local anti-terror measures in the Karabakh Economic Region. Launched on the 19th of September in 2023, an operation aimed to restore the country's constitutional order. Baku's main objectives were to ensure the implementation of the trilateral statement, prevent large-scale provocations in the Karabakh Economic Zone region, and disarm Armenian armed formations from Azerbaijani territory. Using precision-guided weapons, frontline and rear positions of Armenian armed forces, long-term firing points, as well as combat equipment and military facilities were destroyed. During these local anti-terror measures, civilians and civilian infrastructure were not targeted. Armenian military personnel, running low on ammunition, abandoned their combat positions in disarray and panic. As a result of these anti-terror measures, Armenia's illegal military formations surrendered in less than 24 hours. This victory enabled Azerbaijan to fully restore its state sovereignty and territorial integrity and brought an end to separatism in Karabakh. The successful operation has prevented years of provocations and illegal actions by Armenia. During the local anti-terror measures, 192 Azerbaijani soldiers were killed. According to the decree signed by President Ilham Aliyev, the 20th of September is annually celebrated as State Sovereignty Day in Azerbaijan.
The European Union and Azerbaijan will create a high-level economic working group to strengthen ties in future cooperation. The EU's Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos made the comment on X after her meeting with Azerbaijan's Economy Minister Mikhail Jabarov in Baku. They both highlighted how peace in the region can now open up opportunities for markets, trade and investment. Well, Marta Kos began a 2-day visit to Armenia today. Her trip comes as Armenia and Azerbaijan continue peace talks, with the EU seeking to promote its regional connectivity agenda. In Yerevan, Kos will meet the country's top leadership, attend the signing of projects with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and visit EU-backed initiatives. Well, as we've been hearing, Marta Kos is in Armenia and Azerbaijan this week to discuss energy, connectivity and regional cooperation. But Georgia, once the frontrunner in EU integration, has been left off the agenda. Our correspondent Nini Nikolaishvili is in the Georgian capital with more on Tbilisi's reaction.
European External Action Service Secretary General Marta Kos is visiting Armenia and Azerbaijan this week. The focus is clear: connectivity, energy and deepening regional cooperation with the EU. But Georgia, once the most European-oriented country in the South Caucasus, has been left off the list. This omission is more than symbolic. For years, Georgia was considered the natural hub for European connectivity projects in the region, the front runner in EU integration. Now the troll is slipping away. Armenia and Azerbaijan, once lagging behind, are actively enhancing ties with Brussels and positioning themselves as key players in new transport and energy corridors. By contrast, the EU has almost frozen political engagement with Georgia, sidelining it from exactly the kind of initiatives where it should be central. Prime Minister Irakli Qobakhidze reacted sharply, repeating his narrative that the European bureaucracy is guided by external forces rather than Europe's real interests. He criticized Brussels for Soviet-style policies and insisted that Georgia remains open to resetting relations once the war in Ukraine ends. But the rhetoric is unchanged, and so is the reality. While Qobakhidze takes EU decision-making, Georgia is missing out on strategic opportunities that its neighbors are seizing. The diplomatic message is also unmistakable. Europe is investing in the South Caucasus, but not in Georgia. What was once the region's most European country is now drifting away, and the government in Tbilisi shows little urgency about the cost of being left behind. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
Armenia's National Security Service Director Antranik Simonyan will attend the third Baku Security Forum held from September 19th to 21st. His attendance was confirmed in a statement from the NSS press service. The event brings together intelligence and security officials from around the world to discuss joint responses to terrorism, armed conflicts and global disasters. This year's forum focuses on strengthening cooperation between security agencies to prevent humanitarian crises. In Turkey, a forest fire has broken out in the Malash district of Muğla. Strong winds helped the flames spread quickly, but crews and local residents worked through the night to contain the blaze.
A forest fire has broken out in the Malash district of Muğla, and efforts to contain it are underway. The fire, which started by the roadside in the Key Kishlacık neighborhood, spread into the forest due to strong winds. Upon receiving the alert, numerous fire trucks, heavy machinery, forestry workers and officials were dispatched to the area. Teams worked throughout the night to bring the blaze under control. Some volunteers and local residents also supported the crews. Footage recorded by a drone showed the fire spreading over a wide area and the intense efforts of the teams on the ground to tackle it.
President Trump is once again making headlines with fresh remarks about Afghanistan's Bagram air base. Trump says he intends to regain control of the site, long considered one of the largest and most strategic military installations in the region. Our Afghanistan correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
In a recent statement, US President Donald Trump criticized the Biden administration for what he called the abandonment of Bagram during the US withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. He underscored the base's importance, not only for its size, but also for its location, just an hour's flight from parts of China. Those comments quickly drew a response from Kabul. Zakir Jalali, senior Afghan Foreign Ministry official, writing on X, acknowledged Trump's reputation as a businessman and dealmaker, but stressed that Afghanistan does not accept a foreign military presence on its soil. The official wrote that while Kabul is open to political and economic engagement with the United States, relations must be built on mutual respect and shared interests without US troops on Afghan territory. He added that military presence was firmly rejected in past agreements, including the Doha talks, though doors remain open for other forms of cooperation. Trump has repeatedly condemned the Biden administration's handling of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and his latest comments suggest he views regaining Bagram as part of his broader foreign policy vision. For now, however, the Taliban continue to assert control over the base, rejecting any prospect of US military return. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
Welcome back to A News Now. The EU's Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos is visiting Armenia as part of her visit to the South Caucasus following her visit to Azerbaijan. She says it demonstrates the EU's support for lasting peace in the region. It comes as an Armenian delegation led by the director of the Armenian National Security Service will participate in the third Baku Security Forum. Joining us to explore this is Murad Muradov, Deputy Director at the Topçubashov Center. Thank you for being with us. Now, firstly, let's recap Marta Kos's visit to Azerbaijan. What were the key takeaways from this visit?
Well, for me, it's first it's important how strong was the focus on economic cooperation. So this time, the EU didn't limit its engagement. At least verbally, on the sphere of energy, which has traditionally been the major feature between Baku and Brussels. And of course, the parties emphasize the success achieved in the sphere, and also Azerbaijan's status as a reliable, significant partner of the EU in terms of energy security. But at the same time, the EU representative made pledges regarding European economic participation in the restoration of liberated territories, but not only. So there were talks about the EU investing in the sphere of infrastructure, communications, and technological development, IT, but of course mentioning also the EU's willingness to be part of the Great Return project economically. Is important indeed. And also another important thing that I would like to mention is the focus on the process of
So let's turn our attention to Yerevan. And what do you think could be on the agenda here, as we already have a sense of who KOS is set to meet in Armenia?
I think also we should have in mind that today marks the second anniversary of the anti-terror operation by Azerbaijani armed forces, which fully restored sovereignty of Azerbaijan. And of course, I don't think that the visit of Madam KOS was somehow meant to be held on this particular date, but it's still important that we have witnessed a very significant evolution in the Europeans' position on that. So, if you have to remember that for a while after 2023, some key decision makers in Brussels tried to throw doubt on the full sovereignty of Azerbaijan, and they even calls for sanctions, etc. And I'm glad that the parties have managed to overcome this misunderstandings, and that Europe has recognized fully and uncompromisingly Azerbaijani sovereignty and supports now the vision of the future of Karabakh.
And what about the agenda for these meetings in Yerevan? What do you think could be there?
I think again the EU will make focus on how it can contribute to the peace effort following the Washington Memorandum. So I think that Brussels now doesn't want to be left out of the process after the U.S. made a significant move months ago, and also given certain discrepancies, let's say, between Brussels and Washington in their position on a number of issues, starting with Ukraine and many others. I think that Europe understands that in order to stay relevant as a major actor in South Caucasus, it has to offer something, and not only on the level of declarations, but also tangibly. And I think in Armenia, so we will hear also pledges from Brussels to support peace. And I'm sure there will be discussions about the fate of the European so-called mission in Armenia. To which Baku has had a number of questions regarding its true purpose. And also given that now Yerevan and Baku seem to be on the track to full reconciliation, probably Brussels and Yerevan will start to discuss how the status of this mission can be changed, or even, let's say, ended.
In that overall stability in the South Caucasus, what opportunities does that present to the EU?
First of all, I think the emphasis on the Global Gateway project is worth attention. Recently we've been witness how such projects as Middle Corridor, as the North-South, or the most recently the so-called Trump corridor, which also can be viewed as part of this West-East connectivity, but I mean, of course, it has a specific focus on American interests. So they have been all promoted and encouraged by respective political leaders. So the Global Gateway is the Brussels attempt also to stay in the great game of logistics, of connectivity. And the fact that now, I mean, Europe has visibly increased its interaction with both Baku and Yerevan, I think it's makes me suggest that we will hear more on this. And I would add to this the issue of Caspian pipeline, potential pipeline, which has been discussed for ages. But now, I mean, with the recent visits of the leader of Turkmenistan to Baku, and then President Aliyev's visit to Turkmenistan, where this issue has been raised. And also, let's remember that a number of occasions, President Aliyev emphasized that any, let's say, effort to complete this project, it depends on investment from outside actors interested in it. And of course, by President meant Europe as the actor which indeed has the capacity and interest to buy this potential volumes of gas from Turkmenistan. So I think if Brussels is serious about its engagement in the region, it will at some point raise this issue as well.
So why do you think that Georgia has been excluded from this visit?
Well, unfortunately, since 2024, we've been seeing this escalating tension between the EU and Georgia. And so, in my opinion, so what happened is that European bureaucracy tries to show Tbilisi that there can be no mutually beneficial engagement with Georgia, while the latter would continue to deny the major requirements that Brussels has to its candidate countries. So I think this tension is related to the fact that, I mean, after Tbilisi was granted this candidate status in 2023, Europe expected definitely more from Georgia, and it's not only about, let's say, Georgia's democratic credentials and its willingness to comply with the requirements of the EU, but there are also definitely geopolitical undertones. I think Brussels is frustrated with the fact that Georgia has been very pronouncedly neutral in Ukraine, and there are also allegations that actually Georgia is actively helping Russia in evading European sanctions. So yeah, I think the Brussels wants to kind of prove that it won't extend its traditional economic and other forms of cooperation, while Georgia will continue to kind of refuse to comply on the political and diplomatic track.
So let's turn our attention to some other developments from today. We know that an Armenian delegation will participate in the third Baku Security Forum. What's the significance of this?
Well, I can be mistaken, but I think that there haven't been, the visits of from Azerbaijan or Armenia security services to each other countries, and definitely given the nature of security service, it's a big development because they traditionally tend to be quite conservative when it comes to dealing with countries deemed hostile or at least unfriendly, and it's of course a big signal from Yerevan and from Baku, of course, as well, that they see when it comes to reconciliation, and then they intend to not only, let's say, remain in the position of of the minimal peace, let's say there's no violence going on, and they actively want to build cooperative environment when there can be extensive contact with different institutional services, not only between the heads of state on the political level, but also more technical level, which can be
it's certainly one to watch, isn't it? Thank you so much. Sorry we're running out of time, but it was wonderful to have you on the programme.
Thank you.
Well, you're up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.